Good evening. May you please state your name?
Byron Brown,
And what news station do you work with?
News Channel 12 in Jackson.
And what is your position?
I'm the evening anchor, 5, 6, and 10.
Okay, so we'll just ask you a few basic questions on today. May you please explain what are your views of ethics today as if in fabrication or how journalism is basically going in today's society? What advice would you give to upcoming journalists?
Well, I'm kind of old school in this point. I think that you always have to check your facts, double check your facts, whatever you're doing when you're telling a story. That is probably the most important thing. If you're a true journalist, you want to be point on what your facts are in the story. There's always two sides, sometimes with three sides, whatever, to a story, but you always want to check your facts. I think today with social media, so many people want to take information out there and just put it out, whether it's right or wrong, because they want to get out there and they want to get it out there quick. But it's better to be right than quick when it comes to getting information out. So always check your facts before you put out the story.
So facts play a major role. What facts do you actually have to get from those individuals that when you're going out on the scene or reporting a story?
Well, one, you always want to find out how it happened, why it happened, where it happened. Those are the key things that you want to know about. So you want to double check that information, and there's always sources that you can check that with. If it's a story about a crime, you never want to say someone committed the crime because they haven't been convicted until they've had their day in court. So that's the thing. You always want to make sure that you have the correct name of somebody who's involved in something. You don't want to just make something up because that can get you in a lot of trouble if somebody comes back to you. So you always want to make sure that you're checking those facts. There's police, there's agencies that can give you that information. There's a lot of different ways to double check the facts to what's going on the story.
So what's the best advice that you can give to college students that's coming into the field of journalism?
Well, if you want to be a journalist, I think one thing, you have to be hungry. You have to have set goals for yourself. You have to realize that this is a business that if you're passionate about it, you decide what it is that you want to do. You have to realize that you have to be patient when you're in this field. You have to be portable. You have to be willing to go different places to get that first start. You can't worry about how much money you're going to make, because that's the one thing people always say, I want to make all this money starting out, and then they realize that it doesn't really pay well in the beginning. But you have to, if you set goals for yourself and say, where do I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, then you realize that there are opportunities. This is a career, it's not just about a job. If you realize that you're in this for a career, then it's a good position to be in. But if you like journalism, realize that it's not a 9-to-5 job. You will work many hours, you will work holidays, you will work on vacation, you can be called off on your vacation. If you realize it's that kind of a business and you like that, and like an ever-changing job, then it's a business that you should get into. But you got to like what you do.
And may I ask one last and final question? How long have you been in this business?
You really want to know that? Over 25 years.
That's great.
So I've been in, this is all I've done. I started out in college. I did 3 internships when I was in college, and that was probably the most important thing that got me my start. Through those internships, I got hired as an intern when I was a junior in college, because I started out interning in sports, and through that sports internship, after the 3rd internship, they hired me as a photographer. So I started my career as a photographer, and I shot for 2 years before I got on air. And that landed me into a reporter's job after shooting for 2 years. So I was behind the scenes before I got in front of the camera. And then I worked my way up.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you for your time. Thank you for allowing us to interview you, and we would thank you.
Well, thank you.
So, good afternoon. May you please state your name for me?
Perrise Thomas, that is P-E-R-R-I-S-E, Thomas, T-H-O-M-A-S.
And Ms. Thomas, where do you work?
For WJTV News Channel 12.
Still located in Jackson, Mississippi?
It sure is.
And how long have you been working with them?
I've been at WJTV for about 1.5 years.
Okay, do you enjoy your job?
I do.
You love it?
I love it.
So I start off just by asking, what is your dream story and how do you intend to cover it?
That's a tough question. I mean, your dream story, I just feel like it'll just come. You know, I don't know what the story is, but it's going to be one of those major stories that gets national attention, and I'm just all over it, and I cover every single angle and base and make something come out of it. That'll be my dream story. Making a difference somehow within that story.
What are your personal views of journalism in today's society?
Journalism is tough. You know, you catch a lot of flack because, I mean, you have hundreds of thousands of viewers in this market, say, but I mean, you have viewers worldwide, so it's very hard to please everybody. You simply, you can't, and you constantly have people down your back. You constantly have people that love you, you have people that hate you, so it's just a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
So as a reporter, if you were placed on a deadline and you could not meet the deadline, what would you do?
Well, if you're getting close to crunch time, that's why it is a station that's supposed to be a teamwork. It's not Perrise TV, it is WJTV, meaning there are other people within the newsroom. So if you look at your clock and you say, okay, it's getting close to 5 o'clock or the 6 o'clock show or the 10 o'clock show, I need help. You have to stand up and you have to ask for help. If you have to stand in the middle of the newsroom, jump up and down, you have to do what you have to do in order to make a slot.
So how do you often face that obstacle with the deadline time? Because I heard Colin going out with you, and like we were on crunch time coming back, but we covered the story and we had it for the 5 o'clock and the 6 o'clock show. So do you often face that obstacle, or it just happens every blue moon?
Honestly, it happens when it happens. You'll have a week where it happens every single day, and you'll have another week where it's slow, and you have, like a day like today, I got everything I needed, now I have extra time, and I'll go back and I'll do my story, and I don't need any help. But it just varies. News never stops, so it's just a matter of when news goes on.
So is it okay to use false information as a reporter?
It's never okay to use false information. Reason being, that's definitely something the legal department would have to get into. I mean, the station could get sued, people could get fired, people could get hurt based on the false information you put out. So it's never okay to use false information.
So what are 2 core values that are your personal core values?
Well, number one, I mean, I value this position, and you know, it's more than just a job to me. You know, I really value being a journalist, and I value making a difference. You know, for me, if I can go out in a story and there is a missing child or somebody being hurt or somebody lost their job based on bogus reasons, if I can make something come out of that, that's all that matters for me.
Okay, so you know, every job has their own set of code of ethics, and you know, we as people, we have our own code of ethics outside of work. Have you ever had to go against your own code of ethics just to meet your job's code of ethics?
No, not so far, but I've definitely thought about it. And it's one of those tough things where in my mind, I can't think of a specific example right now, but there has been a time in the past where I've thought about it, and I said, you know what, if I ever cross this bridge, I'm just going to have to stand up for myself. And just, I mean, even though we have our own code of ethics, and then the job also has one, if there's something that you just strongly and truly believe in, I mean, that's part of being you. Sometimes you have to put your foot down and say, I'm sorry, I can't. Now, I haven't personally reached that point yet, but I've definitely thought about it.
Okay, so in this field, do you feel there's pressure in order to maintain your own ethics when dealing with the job?
There's pressure on a daily basis. There definitely is. And like I said, I've always probably reached the line, but I've never gotten to that point where I've just had to step back and take my hands off and say, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Now, there was one time I was on the job and there was a road closed off or something. I forget what the reason was for, but they let me somehow, I got on the highway to go, but no other cars were able to go, and I'm driving down, I get stopped by the police. They're like, you shouldn't even be here. I said, the other officer let me go, and there was an 18-wheeler, there was an accident, so it shut down the entire highway. And I get out, I get my video, and as I'm trying to leave, they say, well, you can't go anywhere, you're stuck here until we clean this up, and it's gonna be about 3 hours. Well, I didn't have 3 hours to get back, and I'm like, so I called the station, I say, hey, I'm stuck. I can't leave. The officer says I can't go anywhere. And it wasn't here at WJTV, it was at another job. But my boss said, well, I mean, are they looking? I mean, you don't have 3 hours, you got to get out of there. So he suggested that I just back up and turn around and go, even though the officer told me not to. And I told him I can't do that. The officer told me no, I can't. And he made a comment about, Well, he called me back. I was able to figure out how to get out of it. I did not listen to what my boss said. I wasn't about to go to jail. And I let him know that. And then he calls me back. He goes, and for the record, I have bailed reporters out of jail before. But I was not about to go to jail because I was, disobeying what law enforcement had to say to me. So that actually, I take that back. That was one instance where I had to stand up for myself and what I believe in and just say, no, I'm not disobeying law enforcement.
Okay.
So.
And, dealing with certain stories and going out to get stories, it can affect a lot of people that, they get the information and victims. Have you ever been the type to, many reporters go out and like, I have to get this story, cover it, and it can affect them and affect a bunch of people in a negative way. Have you ever been like that where you had to get this story knowing that it would affect the person and the viewers also when, get a story?
Have I ever been in a position where I had that happen? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, where it's affected somebody in a negative way.
I try not to. Sometimes as a journalist, you have to use your own personal judgment. And if it's a story where somebody came by a house, and say for instance, we cover a lot of shootings here. So if somebody drove by a house and just started shooting and someone was shot, and I go and I speak with the woman and she doesn't show her face, or she does show her face, well, depending on the situation, sometimes I will use my own judgment in how I interview them and what information I put out based on the fact that when I leave, they still have to live there. And if the person is on the loose, there's a possibility that that person will come back because the woman or the man or whoever was shot did not die. So I do think about those things prior to interviewing. Or sometimes you'll talk to a person and you realize, whoa, this story, there are certain things that they tell you that I will personally not put out for the sake of protecting that person. So I do. That's a daily thing for me, pretty
So
much.
protection plays a major role in the media realm as well.
For me personally, I can't speak for everybody else, but I use my own personal judgment and I decide what information I want to put out because it's, like I said, I have to leave their house, but they have to stay there. So obviously I want to get the story, but I just have to find another way to write it. If it will affect that person in a negative way and possibly bring harm to them at a later date.
My question is, how do you think social media has affected the validity and ethics in news today?
Social media you got to be careful with social media. Social media is definitely a great tool because we're able to provide you with previews of what's going to come up. I mean, when I'm out in the field, I'm tweeting, I'm Facebooking, I'm emailing, I'm doing everything to get that information out for our viewers so they know what they're tuning into. But when you use social media, with me being a young journalist and with you all, being aspiring journalists, you have to be careful what you put out. Because what you put out will go to, say for instance, our WJTV Facebook page. We have over 70,000 likes. So 70,000 people are looking. They may not be looking all at one time, but at one point in time, they're on our page. So if we put something out there, say for instance, if it's wrong information, we get a lot of backlash. So you just really, really have to pay attention to social media because in this day and age, with it being such a technologically savvy generation, you have to be careful about what you put out on social media. So it plays a major role.
Okay. What are some things you would change about media today that would help ethics be a bigger priority?
What would I change? Maybe have a set of universal guidelines, whereas they go to every single station. There's about 216 markets, television markets, and if we could all somehow abide by there's technically a book out where we all can go look and refer, but maybe just start with a couple of general guidelines and then build up and work from there, then I think maybe that would help.
Okay. Do you think sex and violence have grown to become like the main popular topics for news, and if so, why?
No, I don't. I think the common misconception about news is that's all we like to cover. But the truth of the matter is, depending on what market you're in, if that's we report news. Our job as a news station is to report news. And if it's sex and violence, boom, we have to report it. So I don't think it will be. I just think it's just news. News never stops. And say, for instance, in Jackson, if that's what's going on, that's what we're reporting. We don't necessarily even enjoy doing it, but we have to because it's our job, and that's what's going on in the community. So, no, I don't think so.
That's it.
All right. First of all, I would like to know what inspired you to start a career in this field?
Well, I just remember from being a child, I would listen to the radio and watch TV, and I always decided that I wanted to be on TV and I wanted to be on the radio. And I kid you not, from the time I was a little kid, and I used to practice on the radio and practice in front of the mirror, and this is what I said I always wanted to do, and sure enough, I'm doing it.
Okay, so what are some of the early factors in your life that help contribute to your success?
Internships, I had 3 when I was in college. I had 2 at a radio station, 2 at 2 different radio stations, Clear Channel and Cumulus, and then I had an internship at a TV station. And actually, during one of those radio internships, it actually turned into a job. Somebody left, they said, oh man, we need somebody. I stood up and I said, I'll do it. They took a chance, and from there it was history.
Okay, so what kind of goals would you encourage college students studying communications and journalism to pursue?
You said goals? Well, internships, because you never know what they can turn into. And building relationships and contacts even before they land a position, because sometimes that's what helps you land those jobs and also helps you move further within your position.
And in what ways have you motivated or assisted others in becoming more successful in their careers?
Advice. And, you know, if anybody needs any hands-on training, if I'm available, if I can do it, I will. That's pretty much it.
How does the beginning of your career compare and contrast to where you are now in your career?
Well, I've grown a lot. I've grown in probably every aspect of journalism. I'm a better writer now, I'm a better shooter. I can definitely get a better interview now. I've just grown all around, and I feel like I've grown as a person.
All right. Are there any awards or accomplishments that resulted from your career?
Well, I haven't been reporting that long, but what I can say is accomplishments for me are, like, as I said earlier, getting something out of my story. And there's been a couple of instances. I'll use an instance where an apartment complex, a dump truck was picking up their trash and accidentally lifted the back of it up too far, hit some power lines, knocked them down, knocked out power in the whole apartment complex. So they didn't have power, and they weren't going to have power for about 3 days. Well, they called us. I went out there. We're the home of getting you answers. So I went to get them answers and found that they weren't getting any help. You know, people's refrigerators were unthawing. They didn't have anywhere to go, and kids still had to be at school. I called the company that owned the trucks, spoke with them. Next thing I know, these people had 3 days in a hotel and vouchers to get groceries. I think they got about $250 to get groceries. So for me, that was definitely an accomplishment. It may not have, resulted in an award, but it did give that community something. And there was another time where people weren't getting paid on the job. It had been 2 and 3 weeks and at a time, and it was just on and off, and they were having pay problems. And I was able to get a federal investigation started on this. And so the feds got involved. So for me, once again, it was making a difference. It wasn't an award, but that investigation helped those people get paid.
Okay, so what code of ethics do you value the most in your work environment?
Ethics overall is just important to me. Pardon? Oh, okay. Ethics overall is just very important to me, and I just, you don't have to be straight and narrow, but I like to make sure that I cover all my bases. Attribution for me is number one. You can have some information. I can't just say, this lady shot this man. I have to say, according to, if it was Jackson Police or according to neighbors or, attribution is very, very important. You always need to attribute your information to the source. That's definitely important.
And do you believe that being ethical can sometimes become a challenge in the work environment, and why?
No, I don't, except for, like I said, the instance where I had a boss trying to tell me to disobey law enforcement. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, sometimes you run across those type of individuals, but that doesn't happen very often, so no, I don't think so.
Okay. And my final question would be, what code of ethics do you believe most people value the least in this field? Generally speaking.
Honestly, I don't, that's a tough question for me because, I mean, to be honest with you, the ethics is not something we candidly speak about or that we bring up a lot. You know, so I really don't know from an overall perspective what other people value the least. You know, I can only speak for myself.
Very understandable.
I have another question. You were saying how, I know you mentioned, and Byron mentioned about internships, and both of y'all mentioned that y'all had 3 internships. I know some schools require you to take this internship class your junior year or your senior year. Like, when do you feel like is the appropriate time to start an internship?
Well, I got my first internship when I was a sophomore. Now, you know, obviously only one of them could count towards a class, but I took the other 2 because I wanted to do it myself. So, I mean, obviously, you know, junior and senior year, that's a time you're about to get out, so you get the internship, and next thing you know, it's preparing you, boom, right, to go into the workforce. But, I mean, I had one when I was a sophomore, and that proved to be valuable, too, because sometimes if you have those internships, and this is just if you have enough time, if you have an internship, you can actually learn some things going into class. Like if you're learning stuff at a TV station, you're learning, you know, the terminology, you're around it on a daily basis, you're learning how to, if you take advantage of your internship, you're learning how to work things and how things work in the real world, so it can actually help you in the classroom.
Right.
So
you know that when you get inside of the classroom, basically you already know how to shoot if you're actually shooting at the station, or know how to write the story, basically. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And may you please state your name for me?
Katie Carpenter, KatieCarpenter.
And what is your position here, Ms. Katie?
I'm a marketing producer.
And what station do you work at?
WJTV News Channel 12.
So we'll just be briefly asking you questions, and we greatly appreciate you for your time and taking out your work opportunities or your work schedule. So we actually thank you, and we'll just ask a few questions. So as a marketing producer, what are your duties?
My duties, a lot of people do not know what marketing is in a news station, and I did not either until I had an internship. But as a marketing producer, my duties varies day to day, but then some of the things are the same day to day. So usually I do topicals, which, and if you never heard the term before, it's when you're watching TV and you see it coming up tonight at 6 or coming up at 5, and it tells you some of the things that the news is working on. That's one thing that we write scripts for, go through the video that the reporters and photographers bring in, and then produce those, and then also promos for the station as a whole. So if it's different priorities, whether it be weather or investigative, or if it's for actual story, or for like when the February tornado came through, we did a promo on all everything that was going on, because we had so many reporters in the field. All of our meteorologists are either out on the field or here, and so we created a promo out of that. So those are the main things that I do, and I also do the logs, which is just basically, it's very complicated to explain, but it also shows how the news station works together. You're basically putting in what promos air when throughout the day, and so it's really cool just to see how sales and then news kind of marketing all fit together. So it's pretty interesting, but of course things come up, but it's never the same day to day.
Okay, how are your ethics tested on a daily basis in your position?
I would say they're tested on a daily basis. I definitely think when I'm creating a promo, depending on the story, as that has been mentioned before, just attribution has been the biggest thing. There's just one promo that I was creating that was a little bit more, it could have been, it could turn controversial, but you had to be very careful about how you say things. Then also when we're creating promos about a news story, if a reporter's still working on it and we're not sure how it's going to turn out, then we can't promise something in a promo that's not going to be delivered in the actual story. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very careful about that, and that we're still not providing false information or like a false promise that's not going to be delivered on. So.
Well, within your field, do you feel it's necessary to become social media savvy?
Yes. I think social media, everything happens on social media. My mom, she would get so mad at me when I heard a story and I would tell her about it before she watched the news. But it's constantly being updated. I feel like I came here from North Carolina, so in North Carolina, all the reporters and news stations are constantly updating, and that's the same way it is here. And so you can find out everything going on just by going on to Twitter or going on to Facebook. But it also helps you if you know how to use it, and that's just an added skill that you can use on a resume, in a job interview, that can just help you get that job that you want. So it could just be an added incentive. So just kind of understanding how that works, and then some of the programs such as Hootsuite to save you time, where you can update Twitter and Facebook at the same time, are also good tools to learn. So.
And are there any goals that you're trying to accomplish as of now?
My goal is just really, I like to learn, so learn as much as possible. I've always been that way. And so even now, I want to learn more about all the different programs that I use. And I was inspired to this position through my internships, one of the marketing producers there. And they just knew so much and wanted to learn so much that I wanted to learn just as much as they knew. And so that is my goal, is just to learn every possible, like all the software, especially the creative suite. Of course get better at writing scripts, becoming more creative, but also still having the news there too. So I'm just going to keep growing, I guess, is the main goal that I have. So.
What advice would you give to students that want to look to the public relations side of mass communication?
Well, it's very different. I started off I had a public relation concentration in college. I started off there. That was my very first internship. I had 4 internships when I was in college. Someone my freshman year told me that I would never get a job if I did not have an internship. So I panicked and immediately started applying for internships. And like from the first day I started, I never did not have an internship. I always had an internship somewhere until I graduated, which paid off. But I started off at a public relations agency, and I learned the whole background of PR. And it's very different than media. And so you kind of it's more of this is what I learned, and how it came across to me through my internship experiences and through classes. And it's kind of this skewed view of actual media. It's either there's all kind of reasons that people give you as why a reporter won't write your story. Now being here, I see the 50,000 emails you get about press releases, but it's a lot of writing. It's not as creative, and I'm more of a creative person. But you got this skewed view of the media. You weren't sure where, like why reporters, they had all kind of reasons that I was given, some in class, some from the account executives that I worked under, as to why your stories would not be used. Sometimes, and that I learned after I interned in a news station, if your story is boring, or it's not newsworthy, then it's not gonna get aired. You're not gonna have a web story on it. You're not gonna have anything about it because it's just not newsworthy. But you don't understand that just from being on the PR side. And so I went from I was actually at a PR agency for a year, so I saw it's a lot of writing. So if I could tell you anything, it's very different style writing than news is. It's not as creative. Normally a PR agency has a certain format and that's how you write everything. And once you get good at it, you can write these press releases just in no time. And then it's a lot of media pitching, and that's where I realized I loved the media relations side of it. And I kind of wanted to know more. I just didn't believe that a reporter was just not going to write your story to me. And so whenever I went to news, I quickly learned how the news desk or the assignment desk, how the scanners are constantly going off. The phones are constantly ringing, and you get so many emails. And so it's just they have to pick and choose, and then also making connections with reporters if there's something going on. But it's more than just they're not answering you, or there's just more to it. And so I helped me first understand PR more. And so just like how to be more, if I wanted to be in PR, how to be more strategic about press releases or media pitching. But also it taught me that that's not exactly what I wanted to do as a career. That even though the first day when I was at my internship at a news station, they asked me if I wanted to be on television. I said no way. And they said, well, you're the first person that's ever interned here that does not want to be on TV. And so I did some web writing, and so I learned that other style of writing, the journalistic style. And I was not exposed to that in class because I was taking all these PR classes. And then also, but when I went to the marketing department, I fell in love with it. It's not the going out and reporting stories, but you're taking the stories and making them creative.